The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. I'm Mike Maloney, and today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Welcome back to another CSRM podcast. Glad that you could join us today, and whether you're on that treadmill, got the earbuds in and listening, or you're sitting in front of your computer and watching, we're glad you're with us. And again, we're recording here during the COVID time, and so we're not in our studios, and you may hear a little distortion in some of the audio, or we're not quite the video you're used to. We apologize, but I think we all understand. But nonetheless, this is the second of a series here that we're doing with two of our authors from Overwhelming Victory Press. Steve Connor, welcome, and Bryan Mason, welcome back. And if you didn't catch the previous one, please go back and pick that up. It gives you some insights onto their most recent books that they've written and why it's important for everyone that wants to follow Jesus, but especially for that sports minister who is really trying to be that rugged disciple and maintain their pace, which is the name of these two books. So we really think it's important for you to grab hold of these books, and we're obviously making them available to you. And if you're listening in, you just have to go to the CSRM website, and we're going to give you some other websites along the way to maybe get some of this information. But if you're watching, that connections will come up on the screen for you. So again, guys, we're so excited to have this. We expressed last time that we've got some decades worth of common history, that we've been doing sports camps together, we've been doing conferences together, and now we seem to be writing books together. And the old kind of joke is that while we all have stolen stuff from each other for our books, we've all stolen it from Roger Oswald at some point. And so we see a lot of commonalities, with our hearts, and yet each one is particular in the way that it's presented. We ended last time with talking about you guys being great storytellers and your vulnerability in communicating your story, and then through that, the biblical story and the biblical principles. And I want to tell both of you guys, I don't know if I've told you this or not, but with Overwhelming Victory Press, we have three edits that we do. We have the content, the theological, the informational, that we have a great board of academics and practitioners in the local church ministry, and they read it and they hone it down. You guys, you went through those months with us of those kind of edits. But we also have then a graphic artist that helps the hard copy print come through. But our grammatical editor, the person who makes sure that every T is crossed and I is dotted, and it's different in England where the apostrophe goes, or the brackets or what have you, and the S's and the Z's are all messed up. But you know what? This guy reads all of our books, does all that, and he said, I must have a copy of both of those books that the two of you wrote. Now, he hasn't asked for a copy of my books that I've written, but he's asked for a copy of you guys. And I think that's indicative of how we all feel about your books, that these books are good reading. They're inspirational, and I can't recommend them enough for anybody who's serious about following Jesus. Steve, you're a great storyteller, and I said that one of the things that made the book really poignant was that even some of your relationship with your father, and you were describing some of those kinds of things, and any story that you wanted to talk about. And I ask you to give a kernel of the book by telling a story and then how it relates to becoming a rugged disciple.
Well, Greg, first I'm wearing my Bobby hat, which the president of the American football team I coached, he was also a policeman. Roger Hedges gave me this years ago in honor of Bryan Mason. So we have a dear friendship, and we've been together working, all three of us, for almost 30 years together. And so I got my hat on, and I'll switch it over now. But I miss the UK after living there for 15 years. I really miss it. And it was a great education. You know, travel is a great education. Rudyard Kipling said, "Who knows England? Who only England knows." Who knows Bloomington, Indiana, who's never traveled outside of it? And so what a great education. And both of you guys have been part of my education as well. And thank you. And then the other one, Greg, I just want to say this first off. Thank you so much for publishing both of our books. We looked at some other, there wasn't a right fit, and you were very encouraging. And not only that, you guided, at least I know my book, in some really good, effective ways to create a really great tool for the kingdom. And so we're very grateful for OVP and for you in particular having the vision to put this thing together. It's been a long time. I've written 11 books, but this has been a long time since I've written a book, and this was one in the back of my mind for a long time. I'll tell you just one story. Came from a very unchurched home, very unchurched. Wouldn't darken the doors of a church. But I had this coach. His name was Jim Rexilius, remarkable man. And I thought he was an ogre. I mean, I'd never seen an ogre before, but if I had an image of an ogre, it was going to be this coach. He's a former Marine, flat top, and he had a whistle. Who would have thought old guy with a flat top haircut and a Marine was going to be so effective, not only in my life, but into the lives of so many athletes? I think I've sold more books to my old high school team because they wanted to read about their old coach, Jim Rexilius. And Bryan, you've met him, haven't you?
I'm not sure. When I came over with you for that week, do you think?
One time.
Yeah, I did.
And anyhow, a remarkable guy. And he said, "Connor, I want you to go to an FCA camp." I said, "What's FCA? Future Coaches of America?" He said, "Yeah, it'd be good for you." And so because I respected him, I went. And it must have been 30 years later at a camp, trying to still create vision. I brought over 5 Scottish leaders. And here he is still doing those camps 30 years on, taking a week out of his summer, very short summer for a football coach, and bringing, he must have had 2 busloads for years, busloads of taking people over. So I get to tell that story. Another story I get to tell is of Norm Evans. He was a great influence of mine when I was with the Bears. And it was great because he's done it all, so nothing's impressed him. So he didn't care if you were making an impact on a team or if you were a starter, which was good for me because I was doing neither. And he brought me to his conferences and was a great influence. And then I was a co-fellow worker with him, so I learned so much. So many people in my life that I just wanted to write about the influence that they've had and then use those principles and merge them together to create a rugged disciple. So, yeah.
In some ways, Steve, in some ways, I feel like your book was more than a tell how to do it. It was a show how to do it. And I know that for me, it really did reinforce what I believe, that this disciple making is a lifelong. It's not an event. An event can be used, but your take on this, I think, is what we have lost in the church. And we've turned evangelism into an event rather than a relationship that exists over a period of time. And what you do in your book so well is that you bring to life the people that influenced you, that discipled you, and sometimes they didn't even know they were doing it. But you were smart enough to figure it out, and reflectively, you have been able then to grab hold of these principles. And I'm gonna, and again, we said in the previous podcast that these are not necessarily how to run your league, but I'm going to tell you that both of these books are how you need to interact with people as you disciple them and reach them for Jesus, as well as in your own life. And so what you have given us, Steve, is a real gift to help us understand how to do that.
Thank you. If I could say, I've written other books that have been more descriptive.
Yes.
Or prescriptive. I mean, prescriptive, but this one would be more descriptive. And I hopefully it's aspirational, and it just encourages people. And if you go over to Amazon, I think the reviews have been really kind, very encouraging. And I've seen some people say, I just wanted to see someone do it. And I felt through your book, I was able to see that. That encouraged me to do more. So anyway, if we can encourage people to make disciples, we're thrilled to do it.
Absolutely. And we'll just take that segue, and these books are either currently or will be by the end of the summer of 2020 in a Kindle fashion, and you can get them through Amazon as well as you can get them through CSRM's website. Steve, do you have another website that you might want to have? And if you're watching, it'll come up on the screen here as well. Steve, what's a website there?
All the proceeds to the book and the other stuff, the hats and the shirts, it all goes to leadership development globally into global missions. And you can find it at rugged-discipleship.org. That's rugged-discipleship.org. And I was supposed to say it 3 times. I've heard rugged-discipleship.org. So sorry.
Is it all lowercase? Any caps?
Lowercase. Yeah.
Lowercase. rugged-discipleship.org, or you can go to csrm.org and grab hold of it, and you can even find it on Amazon by typing in the search engine for Steve Connor, or for Overwhelming Victory Press, or for Rugged Discipleship. Bryan, your book very similarly, you tell some great stories, and again, it's more descriptive, as Steve said, rather than prescriptive, although it's both. Both books are both. But you, Bryan, have lived a life, and you have been, as Steve, wise enough to see the Master's hand in helping you to navigate and learn. And Steve and I have both been privileged to be able to sit under your mentorship and teaching when you have done, like been the chaplain at the Reach Gathering, at various camps in various places, and so your spiritual wisdom just exudes through this book. Tell us one of your stories that you mentioned in the book, and how that kind of relates then to how a person can maintain pace.
Well, just before I do that, let me just chip back to rugged discipleship, if I may. Because having known Steve for a quarter of a century, then they often say that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I've been able to take enough bites of Steve Connor to know that in this book, then you'll see Steve in his largest form for God. And so I couldn't recommend this book enough for people to get hold of and let it influence and change their lives. But I've had the privilege of being with the author for all that length of time. Right. Well, with respect to a story, well, I became a Christian as a teenager in my second year as a physical education student in the Midlands of England, and for me, mainly because I'd always been a fairly optimistic, proactive individual. I didn't like to sit around doing nothing. The disadvantage was sometimes there were that many balls in the air, they kept bouncing off my head. But nevertheless, when I became a Christian, I couldn't understand those folks that would go off to faraway places and might have a retreat weekend, or they might even be part of a monastic order which majored on silence. And so that confused me a lot, because I felt that when you became a Christian, Jesus wanted you to get at it and get in it and get through it, and get amongst people. And that's the way my Christian life started, a bit at a pace. I soon got out of breath, but nevertheless, that was the way I initially responded. As I got nearer heaven, then I began to rethink a little. And probably, let me see, 2007, so 13 years ago, I found myself one day at the base of Mount Sinai. And I was with a group of 12 people, a number that wouldn't surprise you perhaps. And we climbed Mount Sinai, probably started off at 2 in the morning. So we hit the summit as the sun came in. And then we worked our way back down to St. Catherine's Monastery, which traditionally has been built on the spot of the burning bush, where they've had a morning service there since the 4th century, unbroken, at 4 o'clock every morning. I wouldn't like to be the monk in charge who decided to cancel on any particular day. And so that was starting to have an impact on me, and particularly then when I trekked across the Sinai Desert for the next 5 days and spent the evenings lying under the stars and just getting a sense of all that God was about. And I just felt perhaps early in my life I'd been fairly microscopic, I'd been looking through a microscope at the little things that I needed to sort out and get in line. And suddenly now it became telescopic. And just the first night I was there, just on my mattress, away from the tents, just looking up Venus in all its brightness, shooting stars, Milky Way, unbelievable. And just the psalm, just regarding the glory of God in the heavens. And so I think that might have been the start of me becoming a contemplative activist. Whereas I think perhaps before that I might have been an active but occasional contemplativist. And so there's much of that where I try and look at every different phase that we're at in life, and then sharing just some of my own stories, probably to try and exemplify it a little.
And that's an example of the book and how both of these men have taken their own personal experiences and translated them in often very vulnerable times and ways about how we can maintain our own relationship. And again, as we emphasized on the first podcast, we really, the books have been put out by Overwhelming Victory Press. The reason we felt that we wanted to be publishing these is because we care about you as the sports minister. We care that you can go deep with Jesus, that you can stay healthy, growing, and that's only then are you able to really go and do the ministry that God has called you to. And that's part of what our call is in CSRM, is to equip you, not just in how to do a league, but how to live your life and how to become that rugged disciple and maintain pace. I want to mention that you guys are not one-hit wonders, but that you're also authors of other books. And CSRM has had the privilege of being involved with you in some of your other books and recommend them even on our website and on and on. And so I'd like both of you to speak a little bit to the former books. But before you do that, I want to call everybody again to the fact that CSRM, go to the website and look at all these books. And some of them we have in hand and we can get to you right away. And others we might need to help find them for you. But Bryan, start with you. And we did a special book with you, Into the Stadium, which talked a little bit, it was more about how to do sports ministry. And you've also done More Than Goal. Is that, do I have the titles right? Yeah, tell
Beyond
us.
the Goal.
Beyond
the
the Goal.
second, Beyond the Goal. Right.
Beyond the Goal. And tell us a little bit about those.
Well, Into the Stadium really was a kind of compilation of almost a decade of sports ministry with the local church, not just in the UK, but really throughout the world. So um, I was fortunate to spend time in Russia, in Egypt, in Portugal, in Thailand, various places, um, and just to see how, in a sense, the local church, wherever it is in the world, then it just needs to play away. I think I think the
The
trouble in
church
the UK,
needs to play away. I just wanted
it
people
needs
to
to,
catch that.
yeah. It's probably more a British phrase, perhaps, when you simply talk of a team playing away. And what happens, certainly what happens in both rugby union and football, you miscall it, of course. You call it soccer. We call it football because you have a foot and you have a ball, and the foot kicks the ball. But anyway, that's another story. Um, but within those situations, then you think of a team when it plays away, it usually changes its shirt. I mean, sometimes the reason might be just so they can sell more shirts and just improve the financial state of the club. Um, but the church, for years in this country, has really played at home, and it's expected people to turn up on a Sunday. It's expected the stands to be full and the turnstiles to turn and people to be there. And in recent years, in recent decades, that's not been the case. It's not sufficient to have just a big sign outside the church, even if it's neon and it's flashing, just saying everybody welcome. Because the regular Joe thinks, if I get behind that big wooden door, will I ever get out again? What on earth have I got in common with people in there? Will they ask me questions? I won't know the answer. And so that person's reluctant to take that step. So the church needs to break out, and it needs to stop playing at home, and it needs to play away. And if it means it's got to change its shirt to a different colour, a colour that the world understands, because they're in that colour as well, and bring a bit of heaven down onto the playing fields, then I think we're making progress there. And so into the stadium is really the stadiums of the world, the playing fields, the swimming pools, the fitness studios, and just for those that love Jesus to get in there and get among them. So the books sought to look at how that was happening around the world. And of course, the three of us, as a triumvirate and with others, we spent a few days, didn't we, in Egypt, in one of the wadis there, putting together a manual for the local church anywhere in the world. We just had a fun time there, but just to be able to give them as many resources as possible. So Into the Stadium was a kind of resource book, giving examples of good practice in churches in different countries. And then Beyond the Gold, there was a lot of that carried over, but it was mainly in preparation for the London Olympics in 2012. So it came out the year before, and it was again how the local church could use sport at a time when everybody was interested in it because of Olympics, to really get out and play away in all kinds of directions. And I think over that time, certainly in London, I know there was something like a 20% increase in church attendance just because of all that was going on in their locality and on their fields. And that particular book had a great chapter that Greg had put together that just looked at all that was going on in the States. And we also looked at all kinds of other different sports ministries around the world, which was there was sports outreach and there was Christian surfers, you name it. We've got a lot in there. So that's just a little summary of those two books.
And so if I can interpret that British about the Gold Book, is that it's really good except for one chapter that was written by somebody from America. But that these are both really excellent books, and actually the Into the Stadium that CSRM pre-Overwhelming Victory Press days, when we were just trying to help we did some books just helping to finance and get them out. But Bryan is the brain behind them and the heart behind them. But they're still relevant, and we would hope that you could order those. And our time in Egypt, the three of us, as you said, one of 12, was we could probably do a whole podcast on stories from there and what we did then. We fascinating time, really fascinating time.
Absolutely.
But Steve, you were part of that, and we were part of a book with you that was called The Sporting Guide to Eternity, which we would still recommend, as I think it's a warm evangelical and even evangelistic book, but kind of a devotional, very, very well put together, very good feel to the hands, with a little ribbon to mark on your devotional which one you've read and which one you read tomorrow. Be a great thing for people that wanted to even recommend or hand out as gifts to their coaches in their local church, or the coach of their local high school team, and say this is something, again, mildly evangelistic, but it's going to give you almost like a thought for the day, something to contemplate. And in some ways, Steve, that book was really what Bryan was talking about, putting a different shirt on, playing away, helping that person that wasn't necessarily in the faith to contemplate things of faith, but still inspire the person in faith to go deeper into faith. It was a marvelous job, and we were proud to partner with you on that book prior to Overwhelming Victory Press. But you've written 11 books. This Rugged is the 11th. Tell us about some of those books, and why would a person want to buy one of those books or take hold of one of those books?
Well, one of the things about sports ministry is that even the people that are listening to this podcast, they're pioneers.
Yes.
Because this is still a very brand new branch of ministry. And you are probably rethinking it. You may be first generation or second generation doing sports ministry in your community through your local church, which is so important. Where are they now? If we don't plug them into the local church and create that discipline, then we're going to lose them. And that's really important. So creating resources for the sports minister and for the athlete has always been near and dear to our heart. And I think because almost it's been a necessity. And so we had to start writing. That first book, the devotional, that one, I've never seen a book that had a devotional that if you read it in progression, it slowly unmasks or opens up the gospel. And so you could read it through. It says starting the race, running well, finishing well. But then we wanted to create a book, and that one was runner-up for Christian Book of the Year in the UK, but it was never going to win. You know why? John Stott won.
John Stott, yeah.
So no way, but I was just honored to be in that area with John, and an amazing, amazing guy, and amazing author too. But we were looking for resources, and then the second one was Principles and Practices of Successful. Hey, come on in. You guys, I just got to say goodbye to my grandchildren. They've been here for a week and a half, and so you're going to come into the podcast.
We said this is very organic. This is live podcasting.
Oh,
Love you guys.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, guys. We make no apologies for this, because if you're not watching this, Steve has a couple of grandchildren, children, wife, everybody coming in the office there. This is part of being a sports minister. You got to take care of the priorities of life. And so, Steve, we rejoice that you have that kind of a relationship with family.
Good to see you. Oh man, now I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
They've
that
been
was
here
a bonus. That was a bonus.
They're doing they're missionaries in the Caribbean, but they're based in Springfield, Missouri, with the Assemblies of God. And my son-in-law is a professor, and he encourages their academic training. So it's been good. So yeah, back to Principles and Practices. What we realized is that a lot of people in ministry were either shunning sport or athletes that were not studying theologically. And I had done both, and I wanted to make sure that the sports minister understood the principles that Jesus employed. I do that a little bit in rugged discipleship as well. But the principles that Jesus employed in his ministry, we boiled down 5: mental demonstration, proclamation, maturation, leadership, and character. Those are the 5 that we do. And so the principles, but then we unpack those principles in how to develop a sports ministry in your area. Yeah, it was out of print for a long time. And Greg, because of you and because of this process, we actually were able to find this wonderful woman to be able to help us. And so it's back in print on Amazon. And so that's been a great one. And a real favorite. And you can get this one.
If you're not watching this, Steve is actually showing us these books on the screen.
I won't bring out all 11, I promise. But here's a sports Bible. And this has been a great one, just as another tool for athletes. And in it, I have images, positive images that look like Sports Illustrated pictures, but they're images of people with the cross, images of people doing godly things they're all sport. And it's great because we've worked hard at trying to make them timeless, because nothing dates like sport. You take a picture of the shoe 2 years later and it's out of fashion. So, but we've tried to create principles that, that are timeless in sports ministry. So yeah, thanks for, you can get all those books at Amazon. Just look, Steve Connor, CONNOR, not ER. And you can get them at Amazon there. Or rugged-discipleship.org. What's that? rugged-discipleship.org.
And again, that's Connor spelled CONNOR, Steve Connor, and you can go to Amazon under his name, Overwhelming Victory Press, or Rugged Discipleship, and you'll be able to get those through Amazon, and again, the CSRM website. Men, we've come down to our last couple moments together, and I'm already saddened by that, because with you two, it's always a joy. And we have had some really wonderful experiences. And I guess as we kind of turn to these last moments and give you both a last chance to kind of share a little bit, I'd like to encourage all the sports ministers that are watching or listening in. If you have, at your end of stage of your ministries, Bryan has mentioned he's in the 4th quartile. I may not be right there yet, but I'm close. I'm not riding into the sunset, but my horse is facing west, and Steve's is a little bit, it's not quite facing west yet. But what a joy, what a privilege to be able to be with men like you. And this is what we really relish, is how God has been able to use these kinds of relationships, and that's would be our prayer and hope for all of you sports ministers. Now, in your final moments here, guys, I'd like each of you to share something, but also you've moved on to some different ministries, and tell us the name of the ministries. And Bryan, you started a whole equipping for local churches called Higher Sports, and be sure to mention that. So, but Steve, last words, and tell us about the ministry that you're overseeing right now.
Well, I haven't moved on in ministry. I've been the CEO of Sports Outreach International for 25 years. But our job is to help leaders develop sports ministries around the world. So I've been to 103 countries developing sports ministry. And that's just our joy, is finding these pioneers that want to go out there and make a difference for the Lord. And it's fun seeing them and seeing what they're doing. I would say on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being a guy that ain't really making it happen, to a 10, I've got leaders on every continent, and I've got some 1s, let's be transparent here. But I also have some 10s out there that are really making a difference, and they're inspiring. And so we're trying to just encourage people to reach their communities and to impact the local church through this great thing of sport, this relational builder of sport. And remember that we have to be intentional about it, and we can learn a lot from guys like Bryan, and for you, Greg, we can learn a lot from you because you guys have done it for a long time and have thought about it, and so deep thinkers.
Very good. Very good. Bryan, last words?
Well, you know, in the Christian life, there's always new things around the corner. So it's important that you look and you check them out. And I think going back to what I might have mentioned, possibly in the kind of first podcast that we had together, just about the 4x100 meters relay race. Sometimes you can set off too fast, and you lose all your energy real quick. Then on the back straight, it's often known as the kind of coasting stage. You can look at coasting in different ways. I can remember probably putting some reports for youngsters at the end of the school year in a subject, and I'd be a bit disappointed because I thought they were coasting when they could have really been increasing. But now being at the stage where I'm coming off the final bend, and ahead of me is the finishing tape, but there's a whole new straight still to run. And it's just important, I think, that I constantly look to God and for the breeze of the Holy Spirit to keep me going. And so that would be something, if I was sharing with anyone, it would just be that day on day, just make certain that you give Him the glory. There's a lovely phrase, I really only just come across today. Judith and I have got a lovely app on our phone called Lectio 365. And just for 9 or 10 minutes, it just quietens your heart. It gives you some lovely scriptures. It gives you a chance with a little bit of background music to pause and think where you're at. And it was just simply saying that so often we come to God with a shopping list. And we don't spend enough time just sitting and gazing. And we don't spend enough time just worshipping and looking up. And a well-known author that we've got a lot of time for, called Pete Gregg, has said it's sometimes a question at the beginning of the day to turn up, shut up, and look up. And a lovely phrase just came to my mind this morning, and I think I'll be using it more than just now, and that is simply gazing and praising. And I think if you can start your day gazing and praising, and looking to God for energy, whatever point you're at, whether you've just started the race, whether you're on the back straights and just wanting to keep up with the pace, or whether, like me, you're coming off the final bend and you're not sure how far there is in front, but one thing you are sure of, and that is at that finishing tape, there's that lovely membrane that will allow you to slip from this world into the next, and you know who's going to be there to greet you, to welcome you, and to accompany you through. Things don't change. There's the consistency with Jesus that there's nowhere else in the world you're going to find that.
Excellent. Man, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to share this. We're hoping that people will pick up your books and apply them to their own lives and give them to other people. We heartily recommend them. And once more, just go to the CSRM website, go to rugged-discipleship.org, go to the Amazon, and know that by the end of the summer that all of this will be in a Kindle fashion. Some of it already is, and that you can go and order these books and get them out there. I can't emphasize enough and how important it is for you to get these out to your coaches and volunteers and other people that you're trying to help grab hold of the faith. Then both Bryan and Steve, I want to thank you, not only on behalf of CSRM and myself personally, but on those people that will never know your name, but who have come to Christ and will spend eternity with all of us worshiping the Lord because of your ministries, because of how you've influenced leaders and you've developed ministries. There are people that are going to be in heaven because of what you've done. And on their behalf, I want to say thank you. So we've come to the end of another CSRM podcast. Thanks for joining us. And again, my thanks to Bryan Mason and Steve Connor. Bye now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Greg, thank you.
CSRM's podcasts are a resource provided by the Association of Church, Sports, and Recreation Ministries and its production house, Overwhelming Victory Flicks. This episode was produced by Dr. Greg Linville and edited by Andrew Fouts. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about our publishing and production houses, visit csrm.org and click on the Resource tab. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.